So welcome to this talk. I'm going to present the new architecture of Zend Framework 2. First of all, let me introduce a little bit myself. My name is Enrico Zimuel. I come from Italy, as you can recognize from my brilliant accent. I'm a software engineer since 1996. I work at Zend Technologies in the Zend Framework team. I'm an international speaker, and actually, I guess this is the 60th conference that I present in my life. I wrote a couple of books about secure software and web programming, and I'm also the co-founder of the PHP user group of Torino. Torino is the city where I live in the north of Italy. And I strongly suggest to visit it because it's a very nice and historical city in Italy. Okay, let's start with the presentation. First of all, if you want to have a chance to get one of this green elephant, I suggest to come close, because at the end of the presentation there will be some interesting stuff going on. So. I'm not Superman. I'm not able to throw the elephant at the end of the room. So if you want to have a chance, please come close. Okay, so what is Zend Framework? First of all, who is using Zend Framework 2? Okay. Zend Framework 1? Okay, I suspect. So, is an open source framework since 2006. Is 100% object orientation programming. It uses PHP 5.3.3. It's completely unit tested, and basically we wrote from scratch the architecture, the internals of the framework. We based the new architecture using events, using services, and models. And I'm going to show you in details one of each of these three components. We added also a couple of new classes, especially about security. So we spend a lot of time trying to give you the best tools to be able to create web application with security in mind. So for instance, we had the cryptographic components. So that is a specific class that you can use, for instance, to store the credit card information of your users, all sensitive data that you have to manage. The password, for instance. I don't know if you was yesterday here. That was talking about PHP 5.5, that we will have a new password hashing API. We already support the bcrypt algorithm in Zend Framework, so you can use it starting from the version PHP 5.3. So you don't have to wait for the PHP 5.5. Because, by the way, bcrypt is already in PHP, is under the crypt function of PHP. So the API is not so easy to use. So basically, we simplify the access to that API. And a new interesting feature about Zend Framework 2 is the support of Composer and Pyros. So that means you can ship the framework using Composer, and you even can choose specific class, specific subcomponents in the framework. For instance, if you don't have to use the entire framework, you're just interested in cryptographic, in the Zend crypt library, you can just use it specifying in Composer. So it's very simple, the usage. And this is the official website, framework.zend.com. So basically, when we decide to rewrite from scratch the framework, first of all, why we rewrite from scratch? Because we jumped in PHP 5.3. So we used the namespace, we used the closure functions, and so on. So that's why Zend Framework 2 is not backward compatible with Zend Framework 1. is a technical problem. So because we jump in PHP 5.3, we decide, okay, we want to provide you the best architecture, best flexibility for Zend Framework. So that's why basically we rewrite from scratch, and we apply the SOLID principle. So SOLID is an acronym for single responsibility, open closed, Liskov substitution, interface segregation, and dependency inversion. So basically our common design pattern in software engineering, very well known in other technologies, for instance, like Java, more object orientation programming. But we use it to follow, to create, basically a solid architecture. And especially about the dependency injection, we use a lot dependency injection. So the principle of the single responsibility and the open closed is managed using part of the dependency injection inside the framework. So that means each component of the framework is completely separate. So you can use injecting the dependency into the components. We don't have any more hardcore dependencies inside the class. That's why it's possible to ship each component using, for instance, Composer. Why it's too easy to get a subset of the framework and use it. We use the service locator, and I will show you more details in a couple of minutes. And we have, finally, we support the modular architecture. So that means you can ship single components and you can create module. So this is another new about in Zend Framework 2. So basically you can create modules that are sub-part of application, and you can ship this module and you can reuse the module. That's very important. And we use extensively the interface inside the framework. So this is also another best practice. It's easy to to integrate the components of the framework in your project basically and extend it. So this is a diagram that basically show you how the new MVC architecture of Zend Framework 2 is built. So basically we have three main components that are the events, the modules, and the services. So what is events? An event basically is an action. So you can think an event like an action, and actually is also a value object. In order to manage the events in Zend Framework 2, we use the event manager. That is a component that manages the events inside the workflow of an application. And we have a listener that is basically a callback that reacts on an event. And basically the event manager is a component that holds a collection of listeners and for one or more events and trigger the events and execute the events. So here there is an example. So imagine that you are writing a Zend Framework 2 application and you want to create a new listener. So basically you have to get the event manager on the first line. I don't know if you can read at the end of the room. Anyway, you get the event manager, so you get the instance of the event manager, and you just attach these events with the name do. As you can see here, we are using just for this example a closure. So $E is the variable that contains the events, the object that you are managing, basically. And you can get the name of the event, the target, the parameters, using, for instance, this get name, get target, and get parameter. And we are just printing a couple of information here. So in order to attach an event, this is the way to do it. Of course, we want to insert the triggering of the events inside a component. So imagine that you have a class, and you want to trigger the events. We have this API, this trigger function, As you can see here, we are always getting the instance of the event manager, and we are just executing, triggering the events inside a function that, in this case, is the do function, passing a couple of parameters. So when you basically, why we want to do that? Because in this way, when you execute, when you call a specific function of an object, for instance, the do here, basically you are also executing, you are also triggering an event. So this is just a very simple example, just to give you an idea how we built the events, the new MVC architecture of Zend Frameworks. So basically, in the new MVC architecture, everything is managed, is driven by events, and this is the way to trigger and to attach events in the new architecture. So this is a diagram. So from the left to the right, you can see the phases, the steps inside the MVC. So we start from the bootstrap. We have a root step, basically where the application defines the routing and choose the action, basically choose the controller and the action to be executed. We have the dispatch phase, the render, and the finish. So basically these are the 5 steps inside the new architecture of Zend Framework 2. And all these steps are driven by events. So as you can see here, we have a couple of listeners that by default are provided you by the Zend MVC application. That is the components that, if you come from Zend Framework 1, you can imagine the Zend MVC application like the Zend application of Zend Framework 1, basically. It's the component that gives you the ability to execute an MVC application using the new architecture. And as you can see, we have a specific events. For instance, if you are asking for an URL that does not exist, that is not managed by the application, we execute an event that is a dispatch point error that give you the error about the dispatching. So you don't have to wait until the finish, until the end of the flow. So that's why it's very useful to have an event-driven architecture, because you can decide, you can change the flow of your application without changing the entire structure. You can just create a new event, inject, attach the events to the event manager, and manage differently the application. So that's why it's so important. For instance, even when you have a problem in the render phase, the render will trigger an event that is render.error, giving you error page information. So if you think about this approach, for instance, if you want to change the flow of your application, adding, I don't know, a logging system, it's very easy. You can just attach the logging events in the event manager, and you basically finish. You don't have to decide the point of your application, because all is driven by events, so it's very simple to change the flow of the application. Okay, another important aspect of the new architecture are the services. So basically, services are objects in general shared in a Zend Framework 2 application. You can think about DB connection. Of course, when you have an application that uses a database, you have always a database object that you have to share between different parts of your application. For instance, in Framework 1, you use the Zend registry to register the DB connection components, the DB adapter, database adapter, and you reuse this in different, models, in different controllers of your application. So instead of use registry, because it's not so good, especially if your application is growing, you have to manage a lot of objects, you have to share a lot of objects, we use the services. So you can think about the services like a registry, but with steroid, with more powerful design pattern. Basically, in order to manage services, we use a service locator. That is the design pattern that we use it to manage these components. So it implements, the service manager implements the service locator, design pattern. So basically, the service locator is a storage where you register your object and you retrieve the object from the service locator service manager, sorry, when you need. Everything is driven by configuration, so it's very simple to create a new services. For instance, if you have to create a new database connection, you just edit a configuration file, and that's it. You don't have to, to write a lot of code. And of course, you can decide how the service locator is able to share the database connection in your application, always by configuration. As you can see, we have a lot of different kind of services. So we have explicit services. So basically, imagine that you want to share an object in all your application. You can just register this object like an explicit service. So it's just basically the name and the object. The invocables are basically object that points to a class. So imagine that you want to share a class in your project, but you don't want to initialize the class during the bootstrap of your application. I want just to say, okay, I will need this class in my application, but I don't want to instantiate, I don't want to create for each request the object of the class. So you can create an invocables. That means basically when in your application you are going to use the class, the service locator will instantiate the class and give you the object. So it's a lazy loading mechanism that simplify a lot, especially when you have a complex structure, a complex application with a lot of objects, with a lot of class that you have to share between different controller, different models. If you use this approach using the invocables, you will reduce the response time, you will reduce the memory footprint, and so on. So I strongly suggest to have a look about this kind of services. We manage, you can manage also factories. So if you have to decide to create a services that the creation of the object is based on some specific criteria, you can use the factories. That is a famous design pattern that is able to do that. You can even create aliases. So you can say, okay, this is the name of the object, but I want to name it using different kind of aliases. You can use abstract factories that are basically services, I call it fallback services. So when you are asking for something that is not in the service locator, the service locator will execute the abstract factory in order to understand how to create the object, basically. And we have also different kind of services like the sculpted containers and the shared one. So basically you can, for instance, decide that some kind of services are shared between all the application or just in specific parts of your application. Okay, I mentioned earlier the module. So basically, even in Zend Framework 1, as you know, you can manage in a fashion way the module that are basically the folder, a kind of folder. In Zend Framework 2, we decide to get the module inside the architecture. So now it's real possible to create a subset of applications that are models, basically, and ship this module with another project. So you can really reuse the code that you wrote in another project. For instance, imagine that you wrote the authentication system. So I'm sure you wrote for sure this kind of components in the past. When you have to start a new project, you don't have to rewrite the authentication. You can reuse the authentication that you wrote for another project. And this thanks to the module architecture. And I will show you in a couple of minutes an example. So for Zend Framework 2, a model is basically a namespace and a single class file that is model.php that informs the MVC how to the module how to initialize how to init the model basically. As I say, they are plug and play technology, so you can just copy and paste the model from one application to another, and that's it. You don't have to do more. We decided to publish a specific website that is models.zendframework.com that contains basically all the models provided by the community, by the people around the Zend Framework community. Right now we have more than 200 different kind of models, so that is a very good point where to start. If you have to start a new project using Zend Framework 2 and you need, for instance, I don't know, Twitter integration or doctrine integration or authentication system and so on, you can just jump to this website. There is a search bar here. You can just write what you need, and you will find the model. You can download it and install, or even using Composer, you can just add the name inside the composer.json, and that's it. You are ready to use the models. So it's a different approach compared with Zend Framework 1. Okay, as I promised, I will give you some details. So let's try with a demo. So my goal is to give you an idea how to, let me, okay, an idea how to start basically a new project in Zend Framework 2. So we shipped a command line tool that is the ZF tool. So basically now on my box I have installed this ZF2.far. So this is basically a command line tool that provides you the ability to create a new project, to manage basically a project from the command line. So imagine that you want to create a new Zend Framework 2 project. You just write create projects and the name of the folder, and that's it. So as you can see, the Zend Framework 2 basically install the project inside the folder test in my local directory. And let's see. So basically, this is the structure of the project. So this is based on the Zend Framework 2 skeleton application. So it's just an empty application. So as you can see, we have a couple of folders here. Okay, we have the composer.json and the composer.far. That are the file that we use to manage the application using Composer. We have the config folder, where basically you have the configuration of your application. Inside the config folder, we have application.config.php. That is the main configuration file of your application. You have also an autoload subdirectory for specific configuration, for local configuration, for instance, for even for testing environment, for production environment, you can decide to have different kind of configuration file inside the autoload. We have a data folder where basically you can put caching file, temporary file of your application. In this example, we have also an init autoloader.php that is basically just a few lines of code for the autoloading system of the class, because I didn't mention, but in Zend Framework 2, we don't have any more required ones. Everything is managed by autoloading system. You have only one required ones during the bootstrap of the application in the index.php. So everything is managed by autoloading. we have the module folder that is basically the folder that contains all your application. So now you have to start to think Zend Framework 2 as the sum of different modules. So when you write a Zend Framework 2 application, basically you starting to write modules and adding modules to your application. So in this example, in the skeleton, we have just one module that is application. This is the name of this module. Of course, we have the public folder. So that is the folder that you have to publish in your web server. And we have just one file, index.php file. And of course, because we are managing using component, we have a vendor folder where you have to install, in this case, the Zend Framework 2, library. So in order to continue with the usage of the installation of the application, we have to, in this case, I'm just updating Composer, because the version that I have is was old. So, and now we are installing the application using Composer. So basically now Composer is reading the composer.json file, and inside the composer.json file is written, I can show you. Here basically the requirement. So because we want to write a Zend Framework 2 application, we need of course the library. So we are just saying, okay, we want the library 2 point whatever. So now inside the vendor, we have the Zend Framework. As you can see, the Zend Framework. The library. Okay, so basically we finished the installation. So if you want to see the results, of course you have to configure your Apache to point to the specific folder. I of course did it previously. We can just have a look. And this is basically the output of the skeleton application. Nothing so exciting, just a static page. Anyway, as you can see, it's very simple to start to create a new project using this command line tool. Just give you more information about the differences. This is the public folder. We have just one file that is index.php file. Let me show you, maybe it's better. Yeah. As you can see, it's just 3 lines of code. We are just saying, okay, we are changing the default directory. We are including, this is the only require that you have in Zend Framework 2 application. And after we are just using this init static function inside the Zend MVC application. As you can see here in the init, we are passing the configuration of the application. So basically we are passing config application.config.php. If I jump to this file, just to show you. This is the configuration file. As you can see, it's just we manage everything, the configuration file using PHP array. So we don't use XML file, INI, YAML. If you want to use it, you can do it. We also support it, but we think that the best way to to configure a PHP application is to use PHP code. So even because it's very fast. As you can see, this is basically a file that returns an array, so it's very simple. And everything is basically in the form of a key and a value. So for instance, we have the models key here. In the models key, basically you are specifying the models that you want to use in your Zend Framework application. Right now we have just one model that is application. So basically it's the list of the model used by the application. And we have others, information. Because this is the skeleton, you can see a lot of comments because we want to, inform people how to, to educate people how to use it. But if we remove, all the comments, basically it's just a couple of lines. Basically here we are just saying, okay, the model path, so our model are in the folder module and vendor. So very easy. And we have other kind of configuration, mostly are comments, as I said, like, the configuration file, where are located. Remember when I talk about the global, the testing configuration, we are just saying, okay, the configuration are inside the config autoload folder. We have also, going back to the public, the HT access is basically the same HT access that you use it in Zend Framework 1, so nothing new. Okay, the real news is inside basically the model application. So here, basically, we are inside the application model. As you can see here, we have a couple of folder. The only requirement is that file. So you can create a new model that contains just one file, that is model.php. This is the only requirement for Zend Framework 2. Of course, you have to provide something, so you will add controller, view, etc. But is just the minimum requirements. And the model.php is basically you have to specify the namespace, that is the name of the model. And here we are using a couple of components of Zend MVC. So the class model contains, in this case, on Bootstrap, get config to retrieve the configuration, get autoloader config, just a couple of methods for this skeleton application. But I said you can do whatever you want with this model. So basically you can think about the model as the bootstrap, the model.php as the bootstrap for the model. So here you can insert the initialization of I don't know the requirements for the models that you are writing basically. Okay, imagine that, of course, this is just a skeleton. Imagine that we want to do something more exciting. So let's jump to the website Models Zend Framework. Okay, imagine that we want to add an authentication system inside our application. So we are using the ZF2 user. That is basically as you can imagine, we cannot manage all the modules that the community come out. So we have a couple of core contributors, and when the core contributors of the framework provide a new modules, we insert this module into the ZF Commons namespace. So for instance, this is one of the components, the models that I want to show you. So basically it's a very simple module. It was created by Ivan Curry, that is one of our contributors. So basically, this model gives you the possibility to add authentication, so the classic, login system of a backend application using email, username, and password. It's provide a lot of, it's growing day by day, so now it's supporting also Doctrine, MySQL, and other, databases with a lot of feature. Okay, imagine that we want to use this model. We can just add this requirements inside the composer file. So composer.json, just adding this to the composer.json. And we have to execute the update. So now Composer is reading that file and installing the ZFC user module. Okay, so now, of course, going back to the documentation, now we have installed the models. Now we have to inform the application that we want to use that model. So we have to go inside the application.config.php. That is the main configuration file. And basically we have to add, in this case, two modules, ZFC base and ZFC user, because basically the ZFC user is the name, the real module that we are using is based on another module. So you can have also dependencies between modules, of course, because you cannot think to write everything inside the module. So in order to use ZFC user, we need ZFC base. So the dependencies of the file are being managed by Composer, but now we have to inform even the Zend Framework 2 application that we have basically two modules here. Okay. And the last step in order to install these modules is the configuration of the database, because this is an authentication system, so the user are stored in a database. So I use it, for instance, MySQL. So we have to inform the application about the database. So we have to create another configuration file. The name is database.local.php. And I'm just pasting. So as you can see, it's just configuration about the connection. So the database name. It is, if I remember right, users. Username and the password that I previously created. Okay, if we go back, so now the application, the module is installed, so we can start to use it. By default, these modules is managed by the /user URL. So if you go here, as you can see, we have the module that is running that asking for the authentication. So the email and the password in order to authenticate to the application. Of course, we have to create a user because right now the database is empty. So let's create, for instance, my user. Okay, so as you can see, I basically provide also the avatar, the images from GAvatar. And now I'm authenticated, so very, very, very simple. So I think this is one of the, let's say, killer feature of Zend Framework 2. So the ability to reuse the code using models. And I think it's awesome. Okay. So going back to the presentation. Okay, where to start? Of course, the documentation is very important. So in order to start to use the framework, I strongly suggest to start from the documentation. That is basically the Learn page of the official website. Zend provide a lot of free webinar about Zend Framework 2. There are a lot of webinar here, so if you jump to this website, you can see a lot of recorded webinars, so audio, video, and even slides about different topics of Zend Framework. The models is a valid resource where to start, because basically if you starting to use different models of different people, you will learn how to build basic application using Zend Framework 2. And I suggest also to use the Zend Framework 2, the command line tool that I showed you in the presentation, because I think it's very useful, and you can jump, start, create projects in a few minutes, basically. Okay, so before to start the question, have you ever seen an elephant fly?
I've seen a house fly.
House fly, not Dumbo. I mean, okay. The first 3 questions will receive an elephant and a T-shirt. So let's start.
Nice example about the user. How do you extend the form?
Okay, so the question is how you extend basically the user models that I showed, right? 100 of ways. I mean, you can, of course, change the models, but this is not the right way to do, because you want to because the model in this example is like an external library, right? You can just extend the components. You can just create a new model that extend the existing one. This is the good way to do that. So you can just reuse the components. For instance, inside the ZF2, the ZFC user model, there is a user class. You can just extend it and adding, for instance, information that you need to. Okay, so just minutes. I know. Unfortunately, I have just 3. Wow. Second question. I don't know which was the second one. Okay.
Hello. We've invested quite a lot over the years in our Zend Framework 1 code base. What advice would you give for somebody who's got a large code base and wants to migrate to Zend Framework 2?
Good question. So, first of all, if you don't have to migrate to Zend Framework 2, you don't have to be crazy to migrate. I mean, it's a business decision, of course. From the Zend point of view, we are going to support Zend Framework 1 for another year, more or less, but just for bug fixing and security fix. So we are not improving the feature of Zend Framework 1. So for 1 year, you are safe, let's say. After that date, the community will continue to support the project. That means if someone is able to, support it, it's fine. Otherwise, you have to fix by yourself. About the migration, it's not, of course, you can migrate depending on your application. So this is case by case. You have to decide carefully regarding your existing application. But the migration is not so difficult. I mean, because if you think that basically if you wrote the Zend Framework 1 application using using Tiny controller, the routing system is perfectly fine to migrate. Of course, you have to change something, but you can reuse the models as is. You don't have to rewrite the models of your application. You have just to change something, maybe splitting, creating different models, but you can do. It's not a big problem. Okay. I played basketball, so that's why. So.
Hiya. Just wonder if there's any performance benefits or hits with ZF2 over ZF1.
The benefits to switch from Zend Framework 1 to Zend Framework 2?
Just from a performance basis.
The performance, okay. We are working on a benchmark. As you know, write a benchmark and share the data with the communities is always difficult because, you know, the methodology that we use, the applications that you have to benchmark, people complains about everything. But we don't want to provide an hello world benchmark application as the one that you can find on internet. Make no sense to create an hello world application that say, oh, looks, with this hello world application, Zend Framework 2 is 10 times faster of Zend Framework 1 or vice versa or Symfony or whatever. Make no sense. So we are creating a standard application, basically, with a couple of database, a couple of tables, classic, backend application, and we are benchmarking against the Zend Framework 1, Zend Framework 2. We want to release this, publish basically this benchmark at the end of the next month, but I can give you some news right now because I'm one of the people, the guy involved in this benchmark. So basically the performance compared with Zend Framework 1 are almost the same. Zend Framework 2 performs well in a very complex project where you have a lot of classes, a lot of components, because the lazy loading systems, you can imagine that you don't have to initialize everything during the bootstrap. You can just use it when you have to use it. So that's why. Yeah. But of course, when you perform Zend Framework 2 with Zend Framework 1, we are also to think about the new feature, the advantages. So I think it's not so easy, but the performance are almost the same. I try. Oh, sorry, I failed.
To stop with plenary questions now.
Okay.
I guess you can carry on.
Yeah, we have time? No.
We have run out of time, yeah?
Okay, because I have a lot of gadgets here, so.
Yeah.
But I promise also a T-shirt for the elephant. So the one. Oh, you have the same T-shirt.
Question.
Okay.
All right. One last question. It's
Please. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take one.
You said it was MVC, but comparing on a sort of Zend Framework 1 is, you have the models and your controllers and your views, and I wasn't quite sure how that worked out in Zend Framework 2 because you saw the modules, but we didn't actually see how that translated into views and controllers.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. So the question is about the models, the differences of Zend Framework 1 and Zend Framework 2?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it's completely different. I mean, in the Zend Framework 1, basically the modules were just a folder, basically, where you have controllers, even the routing system, you have modules / controllers / action. That's it. I mean, there is not a real management of modules inside Zend Framework 1. You cannot, it's always difficult in Zend Framework 1 to take one module and copy and paste in another project because it's, it's completely integrated into the application. In Zend Framework 2, that's completely different. A module is like a standalone application, basically, that is attached to an existing one. So that's why it's so simple to reuse the code if you write models in Zend Framework 2. That's why we publish the website models.zendframework.com. So people can really reuse the code and don't spend time to reinvent the wheel each time. So if you want, there is a t-shirt here for you. Another question? Here, okay.
Do you think of the service locator and service management system as being an alternative to dependency injection?
It's not a real alternative. It's just a way to share, to collect objects in a single point. Of course, you have to inject this dependency inside another class, another component. So you can think about a service locator like a Zend registry. That's one possibility. It's very easy to migrate a Zend Framework 1 application in Zend Framework 2 if you think about Zend services instead of Zend registry. Of course, from a software design point of view, it's not the best because you are getting dependencies not explicitly, but there are even dependency from one component to another. The best will be to use the service manager as an object storage and inject and getting this object from the service locator and inject to the controller, to the models, to the other components that you needed. That is the best way to do that. For you also, there is a t-shirt here. We have enough time?
We are over time now, yeah.
Okay, good. Other question? Oh, sorry. No time?
We are over time, yeah.
Ah, over time. Oh, I understand we have enough time. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much.